Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Podcast. You know, if you really love rugby and you don't want to miss out on any of the action, make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're diving deep today into a question that I think is on a lot of Springbok supporters' minds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big one, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to take over as the head coach after Rassie Erasmus's contract is done at the end of the 2027 Rugby World Cup?
It's a big question. It's a huge one.
It is a huge one.
It's exciting because obviously it's a little while away, but it's, we're going to start to see who's going to, be in line.
Yeah, exactly.
And who are the forerunners.
And you've shared some really great articles and some notes on this, and we're going to try and unpack all this information to kind of give everybody a clear picture of what might be in store.
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite fascinating because I think looking at this stuff, it seems like there's a bit of a trend. When SA Rugby make these big appointments.
Yeah, okay, so let's just zoom out for a second and look at the big picture here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that kind of jumps out when you look at the history of who they've appointed is that it seems like there's a real preference when it comes to selecting a head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look back at the coaches who have guided the Springboks, in recent times, Rassie Erasmus, Jacques Nienaber, Heineke Meyer, Alistair Coetzee, there's a common thread that emerges there.
Yeah.
And it's quite fascinating. All of those guys are born and bred in South Africa.
Yeah.
It really suggests that SA Rugby, to have someone who understands the landscape and the culture of South African rugby.
That's such an interesting point because it does make you wonder, what is it about? Is it continuity? Is it a certain kind of coaching philosophy that's so ingrained in South African rugby? What do you think is behind that?
It's a very good question, and I think it could be a combination of factors. Maybe there's a belief that local coaches have that stronger connection with the players and, maybe a more intuitive understanding of what it really means to represent the Springboks.
Yeah, and it brings us to the next part of this, which is who are those potential successors?
Mm-hmm.
And given that they seem to like to go with homegrown coaches, born and bred, it seems logical that they would be looking internally once again to try and fill those very big shoes.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, bringing in a foreign coach, it could be a fresh perspective, but it doesn't seem to be the way they've done things.
It doesn't. No, and it's interesting because one of the sources actually has a direct quote from Jean de Villiers,
Yeah.
Springbok legend.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, and I quote, "I don't think we're ready for a foreign head coach."
Yeah. And for someone like Jean de Villiers to come out and say that, publicly,
yeah.
I think it adds a lot of weight to this sort of, internal appointment.
It does. It does. So, okay, so we're thinking, okay, it's probably going to be South African.
Right.
They're going to be looking within their system. Who are the names that we should be thinking about? People who are already involved.
Well, I think the articles and the notes that you sent through, they point towards 3 names that are already currently part of the setup, a coaching setup with the Springboks.
Oh.
We've got Mzwandile Stick, we've got Felix Jones, and we've got Daan.
Okay, so those are the 3 names that are really...
Yeah, they seem to be the ones that are mentioned most prominently at this stage.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I always think it's interesting to hear the perspectives of guys who've actually worn that Springbok jersey, because they really understand what it's all about. And one of the sources mentions Schalk Burger.
Oh, yeah.
Another legend, obviously.
Yeah.
And he kind of threw his hat in the ring as to who he thinks might be in line.
Yeah, he was on the Box Office podcast, and he suggested Felix Jones as a strong possibility.
Okay.
So, Schalk Burger's opinion carries a lot of weight. He's been there. He's done that.
Yeah, he has.
As a player.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's an interesting perspective to have.
It is. And then it sounds like there's another former Springbok, super well respected, and he's got a slightly different view on who the front runner might be.
Yeah, well, Jean de Villiers, who we spoke about earlier, who sort of mentioned the local coach.
Right.
He actually thinks that Mzwandile Stick is probably the most likely to succeed Rassie Erasmus.
Okay. Why does he think that?
Well, his reasoning seems to be that, he's all about maintaining that continuity within the current coaching group.
Gotcha. Right.
So I think that's his thinking there.
Yeah, and he even said something very specific about why he thinks Stick is the man for job, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He said, if this group remains, he won't ever step away totally. I think Stick is the man to date.
Wow.
So, that kind of suggests that if the structure stays pretty similar to the way it is now until 2027, Stick is the natural progression to take over as head coach.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Familiar, they all know each other, they've worked together. Okay, so what about Dean Human, because his name keeps coming up as well?
Yeah.
What makes him a strong contender, given what we've been saying about needing to be South African and part of the system?
Well, I think, Dane Human has been such a vital part of that coaching team and during a really successful period as well.
Yeah.
From 2019 up until 2024,
Yeah.
he's worked very closely with both Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber. So he's been involved with the strategies, the successes of the team.
Right.
And I think that level of involvement consistently at that highest level.
Yeah.
It gives him a huge amount of experience. And he understands the Springboks setup,
Yeah, he's ingrained in it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just to bring it all together for everyone listening, it seems like the key things that point towards who might be the next Springboks head coach after 2027 are those two elements really being South African born and bred and being part of the system, the SA Rugby system.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at those criteria, Mzwandile Stick, Felix Jones, Daan Human, those names really come to the fore as the most likely candidates at this stage.
Yeah, because they tick those boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that gives you a really good overview, I think, of the potential people who could be leading the Springboks.
Yeah.
After 2027. And it's all based on the information that you shared with us. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I think what's interesting is that they really do seem to want to stick with what they know and continue with that same sort of approach of bringing in someone who understands South African rugby.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting. It's a commitment to a certain way of doing things.
It is so we'd love to hear what you think about all this.
Yeah.
Who do you think would be the best fit to take on this huge job of following Rassie Erasmus's footsteps?
Yeah.
Head over to the comments section and let us know what you think.
Yeah, we'd love to know who you think should be leading the Springboks.
Exactly. And while you're there, if you haven't already done so,
yeah,
make sure you subscribe to Rugby Obsession.
Yeah.
So that you don't miss out on any of our future deep dives into the world of rugby.
It brings up an interesting point, actually. Beyond simply being South African and being part of the current setup, what qualities or experiences do you think are going to be the most vital for the next Springboks coach?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it's one for the comment section.
Yeah. Let us know.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rugby Obsession podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive. We look forward to you listening to our next episode.
Absolutely.
Where we'll be unpacking yet another fascinating aspect of this wonderful game.
And don't forget,
make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out.
Yeah.
Thanks again, everyone.
Cheers.